The Grand Elector Kalen stood upon the dais, his thin, elongated frame silhouetted against the swirling nebulae projected onto the vaulted obsidian ceiling of the conquered chamber. Below him, the lumina, a crystal of impossible size and clarity, pulsed with a soft, internal light, its hue shifting with the collective emotional state of the assembled delegates. For 3 standard cycles, it had glowed with the cold, anxious blue of uncertainty. The chamber was a marvel of ancient engineering, carved from the heart of a rogue planetoid and home to the fragile unity of the known galactic powers. Representatives from 1,000 worlds occupied their designated alcoves, their forms ranging from the crystalline structures of the Signian Veil to the armored carapaces of the Cathar warrior caste. Yet for all their diversity, a single unifying tension held them in a state of suspended animation. It was a silence that had fallen not in this room, but light years away, in a minor spiral arm of the galaxy, in an unremarkable yellow dwarf system. Earth had gone silent. The silence was absolute. Not a single transmission from the chaotic streams of entertainment data to the meticulously encrypted diplomatic communiques had been detected. The ceaseless, noisy, vibrant outpouring of an entire species had vanished as if a switch had been thrown. Trade vessels bound for the Sol system reported their arrival at the edge of the heliosphere, only to find nothing. No automated beacons, no welcoming hails, no threats, just a profound and unnerving quiet. It was a void where a cacophony had once been, and the emptiness was more terrifying than any declaration of war. Humanity, the boisterous, unpredictable, and often infuriatingly illogical junior member of the Conquered, had simply ceased to be a part of the galactic conversation. High Commander Viral of the Cathar broke the chamber's stillness. His voice was a low grinding of chitin on stone, a sound evolved for issuing commands across battlefields. The silence is a weapon, a prelude. The humans have retreated behind a wall of their own making to forge some new horror. Their history is a litany of self-inflicted violence and miraculous recovery. We cannot assume this is a sign of collapse. We must assume it is a sign of consolidation. His multifaceted eyes, gleaming like polished obsidian, swept across the assembly. I propose a reconnaissance in force. A fleet, powerful enough to defend itself, should breach their system and demand an answer. Passivity in the face of such an unknown is a luxury the Conquered cannot afford. From an alcove bathed in soft, ethereal light, the philosopher emissary Lyrath of the Signian Veil responded. Her form was a shimmering column of coherent light, her voice a series of resonant harmonic chimes that translated directly into the minds of all present. And what answer would you demand, High Commander? One that satisfies your warrior's instinct for a clear threat. You have always misunderstood humanity. You see their chaos as a flaw, a weakness. You fail to see that it is the very engine of their startling creativity. They do not think as we do. Their unity is not born of logic or doctrine, but of shared, often contradictory emotion. To approach them with a fleet is to present a question they will be forced to answer in a language they have only just begun to unlearn, the language of violence. The debate had been raging for days, a circular argument fueled by fear and prejudice. The humans were the great galactic paradox. They were young, their interstellar civilization barely a few centuries old, yet they had expanded with a speed that defied all historical models. Their technology was a bizarre patchwork of elegant, inspired designs and brutal, inefficient relics, yet it worked. They fought amongst themselves with a ferocity that horrified the more ancient, staid civilizations, yet they would unify with that same ferocity against any external threat. They were the galaxy's unruly child, and now, that child had gone to its room and locked the door, leaving the elders to pace anxiously in the hall, wondering what was breaking inside. Kalen raised a 3-fingered hand, and a wave of silencing energy, soft as velvet, washed through the chamber. The sensor reports remain unchanged, he stated, his voice calm but laced with a deep-seated weariness. The Sol system is quiet. Scans show no signs of large-scale conflict, no residual radiation from weapons deployment. Planetary atmospheres are stable. The energy output of their star is nominal. Their orbital structures, their stations, their defense platforms. They are all still there, powered and maintained, but silent. It is as if the inhabitants of an entire system have simultaneously fallen asleep. He paused, letting the impossible image settle in the minds of the delegates. There is one anomaly. A subtle energy field previously undetected now enshrouds the entire system, beginning at the heliopause. It does not register as a shield. It has no discernible defensive properties. It is passive, almost biological in its signature. Viral's mandibles clicked in agitation. A cage or a cocoon, the distinction is academic. Something is happening within that system, and they have deliberately blinded us to it. This is an act of secession, an act of defiance against the very principles of this Concord. Or it is an act of transcendence, Lyrath countered, her light pulsing with a gentle, contemplative rhythm. We have catalogued species that have withdrawn from the physical galaxy to explore dimensions of consciousness. It is a rare path, but not an unknown one. Perhaps the humans, in their chaotic, stumbling way, have found a shortcut. This was the core of the fear. The galaxy had grown accustomed to humanity's noise. Their endless broadcasts, their passionate and often illogical arguments in this very chamber, their strange and compelling art, their violent and beautiful histories. It was a background radiation that had become part of the galactic constant. It was a reminder that life could be messy, unpredictable, and gloriously, terrifyingly alive. To the ancient races who had settled into millennia of placid stability, humanity was a disturbing but vital spark. Their silence was a fundamental disruption of the natural order. It was a silence that screamed. Earth went silent, and the galaxy knew something was off, not how it was supposed to be. The harmonic resonance that bound the star systems together, a subtle quantum entanglement of civilization itself, felt frayed, incomplete. A vital instrument in a grand orchestra had ceased to play, and the resulting void was a deeply unsettling dissonance. The Grand Elector Kalen felt the weight of ages on his slender shoulders. He had presided over this Concord for a period longer than the entirety of recorded human history. He had seen empires rise and fall, stars born and die. He had mediated disputes that could have shattered constellations, but this was different. This was not a problem of territory or resources or ideology. This was a philosophical crisis. The fear in this chamber was not of a human attack, not truly. It was the fear of the unknown, of a paradigm shifting so profoundly that all their accumulated wisdom might become irrelevant. Humanity had always been a mirror, reflecting the galaxy's own buried passions, its forgotten ambitions, and its capacity for both creation and destruction. Now, the mirror had gone dark. Days bled into weeks. The Concord remained in session, a hostage to the silence from Saul. Fleets were mobilized to the borders of human space, a picket line of anxious sentinels staring into an empty room. Every sensor, every deep-range observatory, every listening post in the galaxy was aimed at that one silent star system, straining to catch the faintest whisper of what had happened. They received nothing. The energy field around the system remained, placid and unreadable. It absorbed deep scans without reflection, its properties defying every known model of physics. It was like trying to analyze the skin of a living creature without disturbing it. Then something changed. A single, focused alert chimed through the Concord chamber, cutting through the weary drone of another fruitless debate. Every delegate straightened. Every eye, or its equivalent, turned to the main holographic display in the center of the room. A sensor node on the outermost picket fleet was reporting an event. From the center of the silent energy field surrounding the Sol system, something was emerging. It was a single ship. The vessel was unlike any human design on record. It was not the blocky, utilitarian freighter or the menacing, weapon-studded warship the galaxy knew. This ship was a thing of impossible grace, a seamless, teardrop-shaped craft of a material that seemed to drink the light of nearby stars. It moved without any discernible propulsion, gliding through the vacuum with the silent elegance of a predator. It was small, no larger than a diplomatic courier, yet it held the attention of the entire assembled Concord with an intensity a battle fleet could not command. Viral was on his feet instantly, his voice a guttural rasp. "A scout, a probe, it must be destroyed, now, before it can report on our positions." "Destroy a vessel that has made no hostile move?" Lyrath's chime was sharp, a note of clear admonition. "That would be an act of war against an enemy we do not even understand. We must receive it. We must listen." "Listen to what? A prelude to our own extinction," Viral shot back, his entire body thrumming with aggressive energy. Kalen's gaze was fixed on the holographic image of the lone ship. It was broadcasting a signal. It was not a code, not a language, but a simple, elegant mathematical proof, a universal greeting that spoke of intelligence and a desire for peaceful communication. It was a classic first contact protocol, one the humans themselves had used when they first stumbled out into the galaxy. But this time, it felt different. It was cleaner, purer, devoid of the background noise and redundant data that had characterized all previous human transmissions. It was a signal of profound and unnerving serenity. "Hold your positions," Kalen commanded, his voice ringing with an authority that silenced even Viral. Send a reply. Acknowledge their greeting and grant them safe passage to this chamber. Escort them, but do not threaten them. Let us see what a silent humanity has to say. The journey of the lone human ship to the Concord's capital was a tense affair. It was shadowed by a flotilla of the Concord's most powerful warships, a silent parade of immense power flanking a vessel that seemed utterly unconcerned by their presence. It maintained its course, steady and direct, its strange hull shimmering as it passed through the light of different suns. On the bridge of every Concord ship, crews watched their sensor displays in disbelief. The human vessel was emitting almost no energy. Its power source was a mystery. Its life support readings were singular. Scans indicated a single life form aboard, just one. The ship docked at the Spire of Unity, the primary receiving bay for diplomatic envoys. The airlocks hissed open, and the galaxy held its breath. A single figure emerged, walking down the ramp with a slow, deliberate grace. It was a human female, dressed in a simple, form-fitting suit of deep blue that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Her hair was dark, her features placid. But her eyes were what unsettled the honor guard of Cathar warriors assembled to receive her. They were a clear, piercing gray, and they seemed to see not just the beings before her, but through them, into the very heart of their anxieties and intentions. There was a depth in that gaze, a profound and ancient stillness that did not belong in the face of a member of such a young and volatile species. She was escorted to the Concord chamber. The great doors slid open, and she stepped inside. The lumina crystal at the center of the chamber, which had been a turbulent sea of anxious blue, suddenly shifted. A wave of pure, placid white light washed through it, silencing the inner turmoil of every delegate present. For a moment, a perfect calm descended. The figure walked to the center of the floor, directly before the Grand Elector's dais, her soft footsteps the only sound in the vast hall. She stopped and slowly surveyed the assembly, her serene gaze meeting every delegate, acknowledging their presence, their fear, their hope. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova," she said. Her voice was clear and calm, carrying to every corner of the chamber without any apparent amplification. It was a voice that held the resonance of a multitude, a choir speaking as one. "On behalf of humanity, I offer my apologies for the disquiet our silence has caused you. It was necessary." Grand Elector Kalen leaned forward, his own voice barely a whisper, yet it filled the sudden, expectant silence. "Ambassador, your species has vanished from the galactic stage without a word of explanation. Your systems are sealed. You send a single, unannounced ship with a single occupant. You speak of necessity. We speak of fear, of uncertainty. The Conquered demands an explanation." Viral's voice tore through the fragile calm. "Demands is the correct word. What game are you playing, human? Did your internal conflicts finally consume you? Have you locked yourselves away in shame? Or is this a feint? A grand deception before you unleash some new horror upon a galaxy that has shown you nothing but patience?" Eva Rostova turned her head slowly to face the High Commander. Her expression did not change, yet Viral took an involuntary step back, a ripple of unease moving through his armored plates. There was no anger in her eyes, no fear, no defiance. There was only a vast, compassionate understanding that was, in its own way, more intimidating than any threat. "We have not been playing a game, High Commander," she replied, her voice still impossibly serene. "And we have not been idle. We have been integrating. We came to a precipice as a species. Our trajectory was clear. Our information streams had become a flood of uncoordinated noise. Our individual ambitions fractured our collective purpose. We were expanding outwardly at a rate that far outpaced our internal evolution. We were becoming a danger, not just to you, but primarily to ourselves. The chaos you perceived as our strength was on the verge of becoming our annihilation, not through war, but through a schism of the soul." She turned her gaze back to the chamber at large. "We faced a choice. To continue on that path, a glorious, burning nova that would inevitably collapse into a black hole of self-destruction, or to choose a different way, a harder way. We chose to be silent so that we could finally listen to ourselves." Lyrath's harmonic chime cut through the air, a question shimmering with intellectual curiosity. "You speak of listening, of integration. What is it you have done?" Eva smiled, a small, sad, beautiful expression. "We unified, not in the way you might understand it, not a hive mind, not the eradication of the individual. The individual is the most precious thing we have discovered. No, we built a bridge, a new dimension of consciousness, woven from the threads of our technology and the latent potential of our own biology. We created a substrate for shared thought, a silent communion of minds." Every human being is still an individual with their own thoughts, dreams, and emotions. But we are now also connected. We can share understanding, not just data. We can experience empathy, not just sympathy. We can deliberate as a species in an instant with the full context of every perspective. We have silenced the noise of our external transmissions because we are now engaged in a single, unified, internal conversation. A wave of stunned silence rolled through the chamber. The concept was staggering, beyond the philosophical models of even the most ancient races present. A species-wide consciousness, voluntary and individualistic. It was a paradox, a biological and technological miracle. The energy field, Kalen breathed, his mind racing to connect the pieces. It is not a shield. No grand elector, Eva confirmed. It is the physical manifestation of our communion, a biological field generated by a planetary-scale neural network. It is not a wall to keep you out. It is the skin of our new organism. Earth is no longer just a planet. It is a mind. Viral's armored fists clenched. A weapon? You have turned your entire species into a psychic weapon. A single mind capable of coordinating attacks with perfect efficiency, of anticipating our every move. If we intended you harm, High Commander, Eva said, her voice dropping to a level of profound seriousness, you would not be standing here. You would not exist. A species capable of this level of integration is also capable of a level of focus you cannot possibly comprehend. We could deconstruct your fleets on a quantum level from light years away. We could rewrite the stellar mechanics of your home star. The fact that you are here, that your worlds are safe, that we have come to you in peace, should be the only proof you need of our intentions. The sheer, unadorned truth of her statement fell upon the chamber with the weight of a dying star. The power she described was not that of a warrior, but of a god. The humans had not built a better weapon. They had become a different state of being. The underestimation, the paternalistic concern, the arrogant dismissal of humanity that had so long colored the conquered's perception of them, all of it evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold, stomach-churning awe. They were not looking at the galaxy's unruly child anymore. They were looking at its transcendent elder. Lyrath's form shimmered brightly, a beacon of intellectual excitement in a sea of shock. You have achieved what our philosophers have only dreamed of, the resolution of the paradox of the individual and the collective. May I, understand it more fully. Eva Rostova inclined her head. That is why I am here. Understanding is the only path forward. She looked directly at Lyrath. Philosopher emissary, you are a being of coherent energy and thought. Your mind is more pliable than most. With your permission, I will share with you a sliver of the communion, a single, fleeting moment. A murmur of alarm went through the delegates. To allow a direct mental interface with this new, unknown form of humanity was a risk of unimaginable proportions. But Lyrath did not hesitate. I accept. Eva closed her eyes. For a moment, her serene expression was touched by an infinite concentration. Across the chamber, Lyrath's column of light flared, its colors shifting wildly from the cool blues of inquiry to the fiery reds of revelation, and then to a brilliant, blinding gold of pure comprehension. The experience lasted only a second of physical time, but for Lyrath, it was an eternity. She experienced the birth of a star, not as an observer, but as the star itself. She felt the silent, patient growth of a 1,000-year-old tree. She felt the joy of a child's first laugh and the grief of a mother's loss, not as single events, but as a billion-fold chord played in perfect, heartbreaking harmony. She understood a mathematical theorem not as a series of symbols, but as a fundamental truth of the universe, as beautiful and self-evident as gravity. She felt the collective consciousness of humanity, a vast, silent ocean of thought, emotion, and memory, where every drop was unique yet part of the whole. When the connection severed, Lyrath's light slowly subsided to a soft, steady luminescence, deeper and richer than before. Her harmonic voice filled the chamber, no longer just a series of chimes, but a symphony of profound emotion. It is beautiful, she resonated. They have not lost their individuality. They have perfected it. They have given it context. Each human is a unique note, and together they have created a music that we could not even conceive of. High Commander, she said, her chimes turning to face Viral, you fear a weapon. You are wrong. This is not a sword. This is a plowshare. This is an instrument of creation on a scale we cannot imagine. Viral stood motionless, his warrior's certainty shattered. The testimony of Lyrath, the most respected philosophical mind in the Conquered, was unassailable. He looked at the calm human ambassador, at the impossible power she represented, And for the first time in his long life, the High Commander of the Cathar fleets felt not anger, not suspicion, but a deep and humbling sense of his own insignificance. He had been preparing for a war of ships and energy beams, while humanity had been fighting a war for the soul of their species, and had, it seemed, won a victory for the entire galaxy. A new quiet settled over the chamber, but this was not the anxious silence of before. It was a silence of contemplation, of a worldview being fundamentally and irrevocably recalibrated. The mystery of Earth's silence was solved, but as Kalen looked at Eva Rostova, he realized the most important question had not yet been asked. "Ambassador," the Grand Elector began, his voice laced with a new kind of awe. "You have explained the what and the how, but you have not explained the why. You spoke of a precipice, of a need for this transformation. Why now? Your species is young. You had centuries, millennia to find your way. What forced such a drastic, all-encompassing evolution in a single generation?" For the first time, a shadow passed over Eva Rostova's serene features. The profound calm in her eyes was replaced by a gravity that seemed to draw all light and hope from the room. The lumina crystal flickered, shifting from white to a deep, somber violet. The air grew cold. "Because we had no more time," she said, her voice now a low, solemn whisper that carried the weight of a terrible discovery. "The communion was not just a solution to our internal chaos. It was a tool we had to build with a desperation you cannot fathom. We had to silence ourselves because we needed to hear something else." She raised her hand, and the holographic display in the center of the chamber shimmered to life. It did not show a star chart or a tactical map. It showed a wave form, a complex, repeating pattern of such incredible subtlety that it was barely distinguishable from the background noise of the cosmos. "For decades, our most sensitive instruments had been detecting a whisper," Eva continued, her voice narrating the silent, terrifying graph. "A signal buried so deep in the quantum foam that we dismissed it as an anomaly, as instrumentation error. It was only when we began to unify our observational networks to correlate petabytes of data from across our system that we saw the pattern. It was not noise, it was intentional, but it was not a communication. Not in any way we understood." The delegates leaned forward, their attention absolute. The pattern on the screen was hypnotic, a complex fractal rhythm that seemed to speak of immense, non-biological intelligence. The constant, chaotic electromagnetic and psychic noise of a developing technological civilization, our civilization, was masking it, distorting it, Eva explained. It was like trying to hear a pin drop in the middle of a supernova. We realized that the only way to hear this signal clearly, to understand its true nature, was to create a receiver of planetary scale, an antenna made of a unified consciousness. We had to become silent as a species, to create the listening post our survival demanded. "Survival?" Kalen asked, his voice tight. "A signal from whom? What does it say?" "That is the terrifying part, Grand Elector," Eva replied, her gray eyes locking with his. "We do not believe it is from anyone, and it doesn't say anything. The signal is not a message being sent through the universe. We believe it is a change in the universe itself. It is a pattern of decay, a cosmic erosion." She gestured to the waveform again. "This is a recording from the edge of the galaxy in the direction of the Great Void. And this," she said as a second, almost identical waveform appeared, "is a recording from the opposite edge. They are the same signal, but one is infinitesimally older. The signal is propagating, slowly at a rate that is barely measurable even on geological timescales, but it is propagating. It is a wave of subtraction. A slow unraveling of the fundamental constants of reality." A cold dread, more profound than any fear of war, settled upon the conquered chamber. This was not an enemy fleet. This was not a political crisis. This was a threat to the very fabric of existence. "We do not know its source," Eva stated, her voice the calm of a scientist reporting in terminal diagnosis. "Our best models suggest something from outside our galaxy, a phenomenon of a scale we have no framework to comprehend. But we can measure its effects. The light from distant galaxies is redshifting slightly faster than it should. The half-life of certain isotopes is fluctuating ever so slightly. The vacuum energy of space itself is thinning. It is as if the universe is getting old, tired. Its fundamental laws are becoming brittle." She lowered her hand, and the display vanished, leaving the delegates in the somber violet light of the lumina. "This is why Earth went silent. We had to evolve, to unify, not for conquest, not for philosophy, but for survival. We had to become something more so we could face a threat that targets not ships or worlds or empires, but reality itself. The silence you feared was the sound of us arming ourselves, not with weapons, but with understanding. The full weight of the revelation crashed down upon them. Humanity's great mystery was not a mystery at all. It was a response. They had not abandoned the galaxy. They had become its sentinels. They, the youngest, the most chaotic, had been the first to hear the universe groaning in its sleep. The phrase echoed in Kalen's mind, no longer a question of fear, but a statement of terrible fact. Something was off. It was not how it was supposed to be. High Commander Viral was the first to move. He took a heavy step forward, the sound of his armored foot on the stone floor echoing like a drumbeat. He stood before the human ambassador, a towering monolith of warrior might before a single, serene woman. He did not issue a challenge. He did not make a threat. He lowered his massive head in a gesture of profound respect, an ancient Cathar salute reserved for a victorious chieftain or a revered elder. "Our fleets," he growled, his voice stripped of its earlier aggression and filled now with a grim purpose. "Our warriors, our understanding of strategy and logistics, it is yours to command. We have spent millennia preparing for the wrong enemy. Show us how to fight the real one." One by one, the other delegates rose. The crystal insignians, the hulking Goliaths of the core systems, the silent, insectoid emissaries from the dust clouds of Orion. A chorus of voices, of chimes, of psychic projections filled the chamber, a wave of unified assent. The bickering, the rivalries, the ancient grievances that had defined the conquered for eons, they all melted away in the face of a truth so fundamental, so existential. Kalen looked from the faces of his delegates to the calm, waiting face of the human ambassador. He saw not a junior member seeking guidance, but a leader waiting for her allies to catch up. Humanity had not just saved itself from its own nature. It had, in doing so, forged the very key to the galaxy's survival. Their chaotic, accelerated evolution had made them sensitive to the subtle changes the older, more stable races had missed. Their greatest perceived weakness had been their ultimate strength. "The conquered stands with humanity," Kalen declared, his voice ringing with a conviction he had not felt in centuries. "The age of division is over. A new age begins today, an age of unity against the coming dark." Eva Ristova nodded slowly, a deep, ancient sadness in her eyes, but also a flicker of something else, a flicker of hope. "The communion is more than a listening post," she said, her voice once again a chorus of a billion unified souls. "It is also a laboratory. We have begun the work. We are learning the language of the universe's decay, and once you learn a language, you can begin to write a response." She turned and looked towards the great star map on the chamber's ceiling. Her gaze was not fixed on any single star or nebula, but on the vast, empty spaces in between, the dark rivers that flowed between the islands of light. "The galaxy is not a collection of territories to be owned," she whispered, as much to herself as to the assembly. "It is a vessel, and we are all in it together. The silence is over. Now the work begins." The lone human ship, the teardrop of impossible grace, departed the conquered's capital. But this time, it was not alone. Flanking it, falling into a perfect, silent formation, was the grand armada of the United Galactic Species. Warships built for planetary annihilation flew alongside scientific vessels of immense intellectual power. The Cathar battle cruisers, the Cygnian light skimmers, the Goliathan world forges. 1,000 different philosophies, technologies, and biologies, all moving as one. They set a course not for Earth, but for the cold, empty void at the galaxy's edge, towards the source of the faint, terrible signal. The great silence of Earth had ended, replaced by the profound, determined quiet of a galaxy that had finally found its purpose, a purpose given to it by its youngest, most troublesome, and ultimately most visionary children. The long night had begun, but for the first time the galaxy faced it with its eyes wide open, united and unafraid.